time we were in slow motion. Now we hope we're fully functional, and we will see how this goes.
Yeah. We hope you guys are doing okay. Staying positive, staying connected with each other.
And we are just really excited to be here and talk about this wonderful topic of self-compassion. And we are just using this new system. So if you can hear us, here we go. We're live. Just say hello. Looks like we're here. And so this is our weekly Saturday. It's kind of like our church. It's a soul session where we talk about spiritual topics, personal topics, based on Jungian psychology, Eastern philosophy, and brain science, some fun science.
Some brain science and some mindset.
Yes.
How do we apply all that great knowledge in a practical way?
Yes. And so if you're new to our group, I'm Deborah Burnt Maldonado, and this is my wonderful husband and partner in crime.
Yes. And
Dr. Rob Maldonado.
Yeah. And so we started doing these talks mainly because we saw definitely a need, but we also wanted to serve, and we also wanted to introduce people to our work. Like, what do we do? What is Jungian coaching? What is Eastern philosophy? The way we practice it in coaching, in our coaching method. So this is an opportunity for people to experience that and ask a few questions if they're up for that.
Yes. So it's a depth psychology, which means that we work with the unconscious mind and not the programming as far as, like the Freudian kind of subconscious programming. It's more that we see the unconscious as alive and dynamic. And it's not this like just a computer program that we rewire. It's actually part of ourselves that we can't see. And most of what we can't see is all our brilliance, all our magic, all our power. And that's really our job as coaches in Jungian coaching, is to really help you see that you're not your ego and step into and have access to more parts of yourself that are hidden and that have been hidden over time. And now we're making it conscious. So today's topic is the art of self-compassion. And the reason why I wanted to teach this is because it's one of the things that I have to work on constantly, all the time. Some people have it more than others, but we all are so hard on ourselves, especially now. There's so much going on in the world, and everyone's kind of magnifying all the things that we used to worry about are magnified. And, regrets we've had, things that we should have done before this happened, things that we could have been prepared for, and even mad about how we're handling it, how we're handling life. And really this talk is about how can we love ourselves regardless of what happens in the world and what happens with ourselves.
And what is the self that we talk about when we say self-love? Or self-compassion?
So I'm going to define compassion. And compassion is, and I wrote this down so we can have the definition, is being warm towards oneself when encountering pain and personal shortcomings rather than ignoring them or hurting oneself with criticism. That is self-compassion. It is really wanting to, in the midst of a mistake, when things aren't going the way you want it to, or someone's mad at you, it's that be able to have compassion for yourself and not beat yourself up. Raise your hand if you've ever beat yourself up before in any kind of endeavor that we have in life. And you know what I want to say too, before we start going into why, personally, Rob, don't you think that I think people who do personal development actually are more self-critical than people that don't? Because we are working on ourselves. And, other people are that blissful ignorance, where they think they're fine and everything's great.
No, I disagree.
You disagree?
I think the more ignorant you are of your own mind, the way it works, you're not doing the self-analysis,
Uh,
the more you're confused by the world.
well, you're projecting it
Yeah,
onto
because
more.
you're thinking it's out there. You're thinking things are
Mm,
coming from the boss, from the friends, the wife, the family, whatever it is, instead of seeing it for what it is. That
mm.
this is part of your own
Yeah.
psychology.
So I would say people that are unconscious really mostly direct the criticism externally.
Yeah,
Where I think when we start to turn inward and really pay attention to our thoughts, I think people that in the first level of personal awareness,
yeah,
we tend to get really critical with ourselves because it's almost like a lot of people say it's my fault now. Now I know that I created this, and that kind of why is my mind creating this? And we get that
yeah. There is
beating
some of that.
ourselves up where someone who's not conscious tends to project and blame the world for their problems and don't take any personal responsibility. So that's what I
Yeah.
was thinking.
Yeah, well, it's the ethos of the Western culture is that you can make make anything out of yourself that
Mhm.
you're willing to work for. So what that implies, right? That if you're not making it, and if you're not living your dreams, that it's your fault,
Yes.
right? It's
You're
implied in there,
blocked.
right?
You're not finding love because you're blocked. You're not enlightened enough. You're not using your mind in the right way. A lot of our clients they first start doing the work and we talk about how to create your life. They often get into that self-criticism, like they're
Yeah,
trying, like they basically, and a lot of our clients are very successful in their careers, and so they're trying to apply that success, like work hard, study hard, and then I'll have all the answers, and that kind of intellectual way of approaching personal development.
yeah,
And then they get frustrated because it's a different the way you succeed in the material world is different than how you succeed in the spiritual world and growth. It's just two different mechanisms. And we try to apply what we know in business. And if you study hard and you work hard, you get what you want. But in personal development, it shouldn't be so hard. It shouldn't be so tough.
right.
And it's not something that the harder you work, the easier it becomes. It's actually the opposite. I feel like when people that try too hard, you get the opposite result.
Yeah. Yeah, so but let's back up a little bit
Let's
because
back up.
yeah, we have to define how we see the individual,
Hmm.
and we have a unique way that uh, it might not translate unless we explain it a little bit. So we know that everyone has an ego,
Hmm.
and that ego creates a personality in a sense,
Mm.
right? What Jung called the persona. So a lot of people, when they talk about self-compassion or self-love,
Mm.
they're thinking, if I love this persona, this
Mm.
personality, if I
Mm.
love this ego,
And it's like ego maintenance. It's like making the ego better,
yes,
building it up.
yes. And there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, we
Mm.
need a strong ego. We need a good personality to get along in
We
the
can't be
world.
like a jerk in the world and expect things to
That's
do
right.
good. Yeah.
But we know, let's say, in our deeper, like you were saying, it's a depth understanding, it's a
Mm.
depth coaching. It's not just fixing the
Making it pretty on the
yeah,
outside. It's like getting
right.
a makeover.
Or yeah, like a makeover, um, polishing your speaking techniques, those kind
Yeah.
of things.
And those aren't bad, but they're not transformational. They're good for making the persona
That's right.
more pleasing and
But what we're saying is that a lot of people think that that's what self-compassion means,
mhm.
right? Being compassionate with your personality. Now there is something to that, of course, but in depth psychology or depth coaching, what we're talking about is there's something deeper. The true self is deeper than that personality,
Yes.
right? The personality that we can say is an expression of that deeper self.
Mhm.
But most people, because they over identify with the persona and they think I am the personality,
Mhm.
they lose touch with their true self,
Mhm.
right? With their true essence. And so when they go about working, doing this personal development,
Mhm.
they're shining up the persona,
Mhm.
right? They're making it better. They're saying, I want to be more confident.
Mhm.
I want people to perceive me more as confident, as
And
open.
together and kind and
Yes.
good and
Yes.
following the rules and all those
Yes.
things. So, when we talk about that bigger self, we need to distinguish between that persona
Mm,
and then who we really are. It's kind of like that witness we talk about in our spiritual course, is that pure awareness is really that's where that compassion comes from. Your ego trying to fix your ego is kind of like rearranging the furniture.
mhm.
Let's think positive and tell myself I love myself, which isn't bad, but it's still like your ego's trying to fix your ego. And so I know a lot of you are probably going, "What?" because they think that's what I've been doing wrong.
I've been doing all these
I do all
affirmations.
these no, but I've been doing all this work and I'm using my
Mm,
ego to fix my ego.
mm.
And so what we want to do is we want to have a place from that higher place. And it's almost like a parent, like a
Yeah.
mother has compassion for her child when the child makes a mistake, that kind of nurturing that we have. And it's so the higher self has the compassion for that little ego that messes up, that has programming and conditioning that leads them to pain, right? And it's like that kind of tenderness, it comes from that divine self.
Yeah.
And for some people, they can think of it as God, God has compassion for me, because if you think about almost all religions and all teachings is there's this compassionate father. But then we tend to hear the myth of sins and punishment and all that, and that kind of that takes away from that higher idea that there's this pure self that doesn't judge the ego for what it does. So
Yeah.
before we get into that, let's talk about how we got up with this ego in the first place, and that's
Mm.
very critical. And you were talking to me earlier. We were talking about how we internalize the voice of our.
Yeah. So just in, let's say, universal experiences,
Mhm,
things that we all experience. We all kind of are raised by our families,
mhm,
by our parents, or a parent figure.
mhm,
Now, what happens, what we know from many years of research and kind of direct observation in clinical settings, is that people internalize their parents.
mm,
Their parents' voice becomes part of their own mind,
mm.
to where the parent doesn't have to be around, but you hear your parents' voice
And
in
it
your
almost
mind.
like on purpose, right? Because the child would have to find a way to behave, so
That's
they
right.
kind of like parent themselves when the parent's away. So that
Yeah.
mechanism of you remember the rules, and
Yeah,
the
very
kids
adaptive,
and
very
kids do
functional.
feel guilty when they know they broke the rules and
Absolutely, absolutely. Not now, by extension, and many people don't talk about this. We also internalize our siblings and our peers,
mhm,
and so we all know that we tend to get bullied when we're kids.
mhm.
Somebody's going to bully us somewhere somehow.
You got bullied, Rob?
If it's not a teacher, it's a little guy
Mhm,
in your class,
mhm,
little girl in your class, whatever. We internalize those voices as well. They become part of that little voice, the ego voice that we hear, that is very self-critical.
mhm.
So think about that. All the experiences you've had with authority figures, parents, uh,
Religious figures.
siblings that would
Mhm,
tease you,
mhm, yeah.
all right? You
I never was teased. I always say that you
Right.
tease the one you love the most,
That's right,
but
but
it has that kinda
it
dig.
has a little sting to it.
Mhm,
And internalized now, that person doesn't even have to be there. You'll hear that little criticism, that little tinge there, um, on doing everything. Working out, going to work, whatever you're doing, that little voice will be in there. So you have to be able to work with it and you have to understand it. Otherwise, you're always replaying all that past history through that self-critical voice.
And so we have this self-critical voice, which helps us fit in. It helps us socialize with the group because we learn like the barriers of our behavior. So like when we're kids, if we're shouting in class in a group, and the teacher says, "Robbie, you should speak in your inside voice,"
They never said,
and in a critical way, don't be too loud. Then you learn that you should be quiet. And then the next time you're in a board meeting, you're not going to shout out. So it does help us conform and have these social norms. But what happens is we create this rigid rule book of how we should be.
Yeah.
And we're human beings, and we don't give any room for failure, because anytime you step outside of those rules, you could be cast out from the crowd. You could be cast out. You could be shamed. And so we have this mechanism called guilt that prevents us from doing bad things, but the guilt turns into self-criticism. It's like when we feel guilty, that it's like the tape starts running, and it's like, I know I shouldn't have done that, and I can't believe I did that, and I should have done it differently, and and not that I know what that's like, but that's where that mechanism is in place, and the whole structure of the ego is to survive and keep people liking us. So if we understand where it comes from, now we go, okay, now I understand this critical voice is a byproduct of my early life experience, the messages I've heard early on that I'm now internalizing, and that its intention really is to keep me in line so I don't make a fool of myself, or lose money, or lose love, or the withdrawal of abandoned by people, that real fear. Then we understand, okay, now I know what that is. And then you try to make a decision of, do I want to criticize myself, or where do I let this go? But most people, they just beat themselves up into submission. They're narrow. They don't take as many risks. They maybe become really shy because the times they've reached out, they got their hands slapped. And so then we end up becoming smaller and smaller, and our ego creates this very narrow lanes for us to act in, and then we're not free. But then we're frustrated. And so then the ego has this wonderful mechanism that Jung talks about. Freud talked about it too, and it's called projection. And so when the inner voice becomes too nasty for us to handle, we have to get rid of that energy. It's like it could be very harmful for you if you just kind of beat yourself up. So all that energy has to go somewhere. So guess who we give it to? Everyone else. They're doing it wrong. They hurt me. I hate my boss. We have bosses that are highly critical, and then they think they're criticizing me. And we feel like there's people out there that are criticizing us from the external. And then it kind of reinforces that inner criticism.
Yeah. And you have this interesting phenomena that the way you judge others, if you observe the way you judge others and the things that you project onto others, if you understand that that's part of you, then you see that that's the way I judge myself as well, right? By the yardstick I measure others, I'm measuring myself as well. So if we're harsh with others, very harsh in our assessment of them, and we say they're stupid,
or they're mean,
they're ignorant, they're mean, whatever they are, that's also happening with us, right? We have to be very clear on that. If you think, no, it's clearly them, because this is the argument a lot of people make, right? Other people agree,
yes,
that the boss is the bad one.
Or I think I remember in love and dating before I met you, I mean, my critical voice was on what do they call it? DEFCON 5. And then the men I would meet, I would interpret whatever they did as criticism, or, people would give me, advice or something. And my bosses, I would take it so critical. And then I didn't know the idea of projection. Someone just said, I wish more people understood it. I wish I understood it, because I didn't realize that the way they were talking to me, or the way the men were treating me, was the way I was treating myself, with lack of respect, lack of self-love. They were not nice to me. They didn't honor me, and I wasn't honoring myself. So why would I have someone else come in that didn't match my inner voice? So like, think about your life and who how people are treating you. You can look at their also, that's how you treat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Or you think it's okay because that's kind of like, well, I'm not good enough anyway, so I should tolerate that. So that's where this comes in. And then we still feel bad. We have the negative voice. So we want to make it clear that everyone has a critical mind. It's like
it's
we're born
adaptive.
into us.
Yeah, we need it. And shame and guilt, we need those things. Otherwise, we do terrible things to each other. But when we become over-identified with a persona, that's the danger. That we feel the guilt and the shame as defining us.
Yes, like I was saying, we were talking about this earlier. I said, I think a lot of people, and I know I do this too, is we confuse what we do and what we've accomplished in our life, as our human life, as to who we are. We confuse that we're the persona. So I'm the person who has this successful business. I'm the person who has a relationship or doesn't have a relationship. I'm the person who is kind all the time. I'm the person who never hurts anyone's feelings. I'm the person who blah, 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 whatever. And then we think if we violate those rules, then we're not that person anymore, right? That our self-identity is so tied to our behavior and what we have and our accomplishments. So behavior and accomplishments does not define you. And in our culture, in the way we were raised, it's exactly how we're taught to be defined. What's your education? Look at your resume. What have you done with your life? What did you get? How did you score on that test? How much money do you have in the bank? I know so many people that have so much shame around debt. I have credit card debt. I'm so upset. I'm so ashamed of it. And their whole life is consumed with hating themselves over it instead of having compassion. And if you hate yourself over it, guess what? It's going to keep happening. So it's not like it's going to solve anything. And so we have to, first of all, look at what is this? What is it that we're doing? Is that we're making the things that we do define us. And we all make mistakes. We all screw up. We all hurt people's feelings. If once we understand that we're all like, that's part of being human, and then that can give us a break and give us more compassion, because everyone does this to each other. We always step on each other and hurt each other unintentionally. Now, of course, there's the psychopaths that are like on the fringe of society that are intentionally harmed.
Ooh, are you projecting?
No, but 99% of us are very normal, ordinary people that are just trying to live our lives and acting out of insecurities and past patterns and past karma. And we're just, trying our best. And if we hold, a lot of people on Facebook and social media, they compare their what other people have. They watch the posts and everyone's posting how wonderful their life is. There's a few people that kind of comment on their terrible life, but most of the time they're bragging about their life.
You're talking about Instagram.
Is it Instagram or Facebook? Anyway, but we're comparing their outsides, or what their persona, which is what's on Facebook, is just a persona. It's not who they really are, to how our voice inside our head is. So our inner voice is so critical. And then we're comparing it to these people that are like dancing on the beach and, hugging. I'm celebrating my 5th anniversary with my husband, and I have great love in my life. I'm so grateful. And you're just seeing what they want you to see. And of course, those things are great. But we start thinking like, oh, they don't have any negative thoughts. They have everything in their life. They have it all together. And me, poor me, I'm like still struggling, inside. And we don't realize that external is not defining what's going on in their head too.
Yes. So from that perspective, then the self that is being compassionate towards the persona is the higher self.
Yes.
Right.
The pure awareness that we are, that's never been harmed, that's not attached to positive or negative, that doesn't define itself by its accomplishments or what other people think. It's really just, it's pure love, pure bliss, pure awareness.
And the person that is beating themselves up continuously then is it's pretty much just buying into the persona and thinking,
Yes. Very,
why isn't this persona better? Why
yeah.
isn't it making me happy? Why isn't everyone accepting me and adoring me
Yeah.
because I'm trying my best?
And yeah, and you want to, we secretly say, I know a lot of shy people will say, oh, I don't want that attention,
Mm,
but we secretly want people to love and adore us. That's what the ego wants. The ego wants to feel safe, to feel accepted, to feel loved. And so what happens is that either we act out of that consciously, we say, hey, I want to be loved and let me do nice things for you, and you're overly generous and giving and pleasing, or the opposite happens where you go, I don't need anybody, but you really secretly do. So you put that in your shadow, but it doesn't change whether you're outwardly trying to please or you're saying, I don't need anybody. That critical voice is still there. And then the people that say they don't need anyone will find fault with other people. They'll judge the men out there if they're dating, like all the guys are so terrible, and there's no one out there, and they're all like looking for 20-year-olds that are size zeros, and no one's going to like me. And then the anger about that, but that's their own self-criticism. That's their
mm,
own that critical voice that's saying you're not enough. And then we see it projected out there, and then we prove it to ourselves, and then we're in this loop of, we see it out there, we criticize, we see it out there, we criticize. And so how do we break the loop? The first step is understanding what we're dealing with here, that our what we have in our life, our accomplishments, our persona, what people think about us, is zero to do with who we are. And second is to have compassion for the part of us when we're getting critical. When we get that obsessive critical thinking, we have to take a step back. We call metaconsciousness, where we're watching those thoughts and seeing them for as they truly are. See, what a lot of people, I think, do is they watch their thoughts and try to change them to positive, or they try to
mhm,
bargain with those thoughts, and they're trying to fix those thoughts and make them better. Like, oh, well, it's okay you think that way, but everything's going to turn out okay, and you're like
mm.
kind of positive. Like, that's what I'm saying, using your ego to fix your ego. What you want to do is, you don't want to fix those thoughts. You just leave them alone and you see them for what they are. If you jump in and try to fix them, what's going to happen, or make a story up to cover it up, you're actually just
Yeah.
you're believing them and then giving them energy, right?
Well, you just threw CBT under the
I
bus.
know.
Cognitive behavioral
Yeah,
therapy,
yeah.
the whole approach is essentially what you described. It is,
Well, and it's good for a temporary. I mean, it's good to get you functioning, but it's not going to lead you to transformation. So is that a bad thing?
no, I agree. I mean, the again, if we internalize our parents
Mhm.
and the critical parts, right? I mean, we internalize their positive voice as well, obviously, but the mind has a negative bias to it,
Mm.
meaning if you meet 10 people in a day and 9 of them say you're doing great, I love what you're doing and carry on, good job, but one person says, who the hell do you think you are? uh
That's never happened to me.
Never happened to us. That one person is going to stick in your mind,
Mm.
and your mind's going to try to you know s- resolve it somehow.
Mhm.
So the mind has a negative bias. So the voices that we internalize from our parents, our peers, our grandparents, all that, it tends to be slanted towards the negative critical bias. So we're always self-criticizing.
Mhm.
So the nature of the work, it's not to fix that little voice, like you
Yeah,
said. It's not to make it positive.
because then you're believing it's real, so you have to fix it.
That's it. Because a lot of people get caught in the, I can't still my thoughts. I can't make my thoughts positive all the
Mhm.
time, where
Mhm.
they're happy and holding that vision. Well, you're not going to be able to do that
It's like
because,
empty the open ocean with a spoon, I always say. It's
yeah,
like trying to, like, empty this vast conditioning of the ego and saying, "Let me just take a little off the top here,"
yes.
and it's not really helping.
Plus, you don't want to get rid of the, like you were saying earlier. it's a very useful function to be self-critical,
Mhm.
but you want to understand its nature.
And
That
critical thinking is better than criticizing thinking. So if you're
yes,
critical, you're just looking at it in a critical way, like, how can I make this better? But criticizing is personalizing it as,
yeah,
you are terrible and you shouldn't have
hmm
made the mistake in the first place.
yeah, and it boils down to this: how you understand that voice, that you understand its nature, its function. That way, you see it in equal par with your immune system or your digestive system. It's simply doing its function, its
Mm.
job. There's nothing wrong with you.
Mhm.
When you're over identifying with it, you think this is me.
Mm.
That little voice is me, and it's defining me, and therefore I'm trying to fix it all the time and trying
Mm.
to, make it do what I want it to do. But that's a futile mistake, because you're going to be frustrated and you're going to be kind of chasing your tail,
Mhm.
right? Because it's always uh, kind of a self-defeating approach to
Mhm.
try to fix that part of your mind.
Yes. So the best way is a very simple way to love yourself more, is to love others. It's like, Saint Francis, having compassion, for others. And, it may seem weird, but remember the projection is always going on. We're always
Mm,
projecting. We see others as we see ourselves. So if we can have compassion for, others when they make a mistake or you feel like they've harmed us in a way, and I'm not saying put up with bad behavior. I'm not saying be a doormat, but I'm saying that we let go of the judgment, because they're acting out of their conditioning, understanding it. And,
mm,
not carrying it around with you. There's actually a story, a Buddhist story where two monks are walking down the street and, the valley, and there's a river there, and there's a woman there, standing at the river, and the one monk is like, we're not allowed to touch her, she's a woman, and he's like, I'm going to help her. So he picks her up, carries her to the other side, and then about an hour later, the monk is like, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you touched a woman. You violated our vows. And he was just going off on the monk. And the monk goes, I left her down a mile ago, hour ago. Why are you still carrying her? And it's that kind of like, understanding of what do we want to carry with us, of others that, do, things, and how can we have compassion? One of the biggest things I hear a lot is, a lot of my clients are in corporate jobs, and they have bosses that are terrible, and it's that kind of like the bosses are negative to them, and then they want to, it's almost like this battle, you want to be right, you want to like tell the boss off and have your power back, and it's this power grab. What if you had compassion for that boss because you're more wise, you're more evolved than her or him, and you're seeing that they're acting out of ego, out of fear? And then that would be a way. It doesn't mean, again, that you put up with bad behavior, you don't state your boundaries, but you don't have to carry this kind of criticism about them
hmm.
in a way, in a harsh way, like they're trying to harm you. That beating up that person. When you're
Yeah.
in a relationship, the same thing, like Jimmy left me for another woman, I'm just gonna obsess over it forever, what a terrible man he was. Now, that's not getting you anywhere. It's your mind is just saying, trying your ego's trying to like protect you from another guy like Jim, but by beating you up about it, beating yourself up about it, and then projecting it onto him.
Yeah. Yeah, that compassion towards others, it is a strange phenomena, because we're again, most of us operate on the materialistic assumption that what we're seeing is some objective reality out there. But if we understand projection
Mm,
and take it to heart, it means what we're seeing in the boss or in the ex or the dating partner is really our own mind. We're
mm,
seeing our own projection on them, right? When we understand it, then we're compassionate from a deeper place. It's not about, oh, I have to be a good person and forgive these people or anything
yeah,
like
it's
that.
not that.
It's more that I'm seeing that I'm seeing my own mind. If I want to be kind towards my own mind
Mm.
instead of beating my mind up, I have to understand that what they're showing me is for my own good,
Yeah,
right?
like, 'cause if I can have compassion for a person who's done harm or I perceived has done harm or had made a mistake even, not even cause harm, but even just make a mistake, then I can have compassion for myself.
Yes, yes, that's it. Because it's easy to like the people that like us,
Yeah,
and
and
to be
have
kind.
compassion, yeah.
Yeah, and to be kind and compassionate towards people that are friendly towards
Mhm.
us. But the person that irritates us or that actively goes against us, now you're talking about, if you can be compassionate in those situations, you're gaining ground there. You're opening up your mind to that deeper self, right? You're expressing the deeper self instead of just trying to defend your persona
Yeah.
against this other apparent person that's in your way. And it's a very, very powerful practice. I mean, that's
It's
why
really v
compassion is at the heart of so many devotional spiritual traditions.
So the practice is to have compassion for others, and then you'll have compassion for yourself.
Mhm.
And if you do feel strong enough to do this, you have compassion for yourself. And even having compassion when you don't have compassion, like I think a lot of people will, the ego is very funny. If you say, "Oh, I'm going to practice self compassion," and then you have a whole day of negativity, and then you judge yourself and criticize yourself for having the
Mm.
negativity, and beating yourself up for not being compassionate. You don't want to do that. You want to have that where you're always doing your best. You're always, your ego is very reactionary. It has a lot of conditions in it. It's like you're working against the tide of your conditioning to have this awareness. It's not a battle or a journey that most people go on. Most people just flow with the conditioning and blindly react to life. When we go against the flow of our conditioning and we start to become our true self, there's friction, there's tension, and it's a tougher battle, but we can do it. We can do it. And it's really where the freedom is. It's going against that. Um, Another great idea of this, I read this in a book way back in my beginning of my self-help journey. When I lived in Colorado, I read a lot of books. So a lot of my friends, it was like the beginning. I was like 29 and all my friends were going to meditation retreats and I never did yoga before. And all these new things were coming into my life. I was coming from New York. And I read this book by this woman who did a walkabout with the Aborigines. And she was an American woman and very rare that she would get exposure to their culture. But one of the techniques that they did or the rituals they did, which I found the most profound, the one I remember the most, is that every time a child is born into the tribe,
Mm.
they get their unique song. They have a little song and everyone knows everyone's song. It's kind of like your true self and it's who you really are. And the way they police people is that if you do something wrong that's outside the rules of the group, even if you murdered someone or hurt or stole food or did something, slept with someone else's wife or whatever it is, ever sin or whatever the group rules were, instead of punishing them and putting them in a jail, what they would do is they would get in a circle and they would put that person in the center of the circle, and everyone in the tribe would sing their song. And then the person would get down to their knees and be in tears and remember who they were. I mean, it was a beautiful ritual. It's like, why can't we do that? Why can't we just, instead of someone being a crib, give love and compassion for that person? And I just thought that was a beautiful thing. So just picture that in your mind, that remembering who you are and that tenderness of your true self,
Mm.
putting your ego in the center, just saying, it's okay. You know, that's okay. Like you're human, having compassion for our human tendencies and really understanding that most of what we do is not conscious. We don't intentionally try to harm people. Like I said, maybe there's a string of mental illness, an extreme fringe of people that intend to harm, but most of us are just good people. And most people have good intentions. And some people are more insecure than others and wreck things. But they're not doing it to harm you. They're doing it for self-preservation. And that a lot of times can appear to look like they're trying to harm you, but what they're doing is out of self-preservation, out of fear. And so that's what I think the doorway
it's a
to
great story.
compassion.
It reminds me of whales.
Mm.
They in certain whale species, each whale sings its own song,
Mm.
and it every time it migrates, it adds a little piece to it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And so when we think about our true self, and we think about that, who we really are, it's interesting how we have these mechanisms for guilt, and the ego has all these mechanisms, but the self in its all powerful wisdom has also gave us the ability for compassion and love. And so we do have the capacity to be harmful and mean and terrible and upset and have suffering, but we also have this powerful ability, and we need to cultivate it. So it's a cultivation and a practice. It's not you can turn it on with a switch, but start that today. When you hear yourself thinking negatively or judging others, just think about that they're humans acting out of fear, and not in a superior, like, oh, I'm so spiritual and they don't know, but it's more that kind of that compassion for, wow, they must really be suffering. We have a lot of people on our in our groups and our customer service, and every once in a while I'll get an email from someone who's really angry at something that we did, or didn't get their download, or and we just have the compassion, and I think to myself, wow, this person is in a lot of pain. They're really scared, and so what I usually, when I respond, respond in such a kind way and compassionate way, and with truly compassionate, not slimy, like, oh, I'm going to be nice to you so you'll be nice to me and feel guilty. No, it's like truly compassionate way. Their defenses go down right away. You'll find that you work with difficult people, the more open and compassionate you are and less defensive, their defenses go down. But what happens is usually we get defense and they get defensive. And so all relationships. So especially now, if you're in close quarters with someone you love, compassion is the key. Compassion for them, for their making weird noises when they're brushing their teeth, or leaving leaving the bathroom lid open, or leaving some food out and it got spoiled, or whatever, and now using all the toilet paper. You were gonna say that.
No.
So anyway,
it's the little thing, but these practices, I mean, they're so powerful, and we don't want to just kind of make them these little niceties that we practice on Sundays, or when we go when we think about spirituality. The Dalai Lama says compassion is like, it's a necessity now. If we want to really survive as a species, as human beings, we need to make it a central part of our mind, right? The way we observe the world, because it's at the base of how we relate to each other. If you think about wars and conflicts, it's just a collection of people projecting their own stuff onto other people, other groups.
Yeah.
Right? They're the bad group. They're the ones that have these problems or bringing these problems.
Especially politically, people are so divided, especially in the US. I'm sure in other culture, UK, there's a lot of division too. And the worst thing we can do is just be so mean about the other party, and be like, they're stupid and they don't know what they're talking about. And it's like, well, maybe they, I think if you really got together and talked to someone, you probably believe the same things. So we have to kind of have compassion for people, what they believe in. If you disagree, that's fine, but you can still have compassion for them. Doesn't mean that they're right, but you can have compassion that they have an idea that may be different than yours, but that's their mind, and you don't have to respond to it. When you're responding to it, then you're kind of working with yourself, because you're triggered. You're in the shadow again. That's why shadow work is so important. We have, it's really life-changing to do the shadow work. You could do a lot of personal development work, but if you don't do the shadow work, you're still polishing up that ego maintenance. And that's why it feels as though you're revisiting things over and over, because you haven't really faced the shadow. It's very powerful. Okay, let's get to some questions. Let's see. I have a couple quotes from us. Siblings is a big one for me.
Yeah.
Someone was asking about siblings. So could you talk about that? Like the sibling rivalries and
Yeah, the family dynamics is so interesting because if you think about the family as the emotional landscape that you're born into.
wow, I love that term, emotional landscape.
Yes, that emotional landscape imprints in on your mind at the unconscious level. And it's unconscious because as children we're not really thinking through stuff and analyzing and rationalizing. We're simply reacting in a very natural way of what is going on here
Mm-hmm.
and what do I have to do to survive this.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the basic approach that the human organism has. So that imprint of our siblings and the way we related to them and what was going on, right? Was there rivalry? Was there competition? Was there anger? Or really friendliness, or a combination of all those things, right? That imprints deeply in our psyche, and then that's how we see the world. We
When you're at
expect it to
work, you're
see.
fighting with you're projecting your sibling rivalry. It
Yes.
even could be a boss
Hmm.
that you're the oldest one. If you're the youngest and the oldest one, you're projecting that.
Yeah, in a
Yeah.
way, we're living out our past experiences. I mean, that's essentially what karma is.
Mm.
It's that it imprints on us, so we're carrying it with us into the future or into the present moment, and that's playing out our own karma, right? Where that we're seeing everything in the through the lens of that emotional landscape that our siblings, our parents, our home situation gave us.
Mhm.
So to observe it, to analyze it, to be able to work with it, to understand its nature, right? We don't want to get rid of it. We're not denying it. We're not making people wrong or bad. We're simply understanding that it left a powerful imprint on us.
Mm.
And it's not a question of if it did. It definitely did, right?
Mhm.
You would not be a normal person if it didn't.
Yeah.
It's the way we function in the world. It's the way we create our personas. So look at it, but look at it with non-judgment,
Mhm.
not in the sense of, oh, what did they do to me, and
Mm.
what can I blame them for, and all that stuff, or do I blame myself for all that stuff? No, you're simply seeing it as understanding why you see the world a certain way,
Mm.
and that it connects back to those early experiences with your siblings.
And again, realizing that it's not real. Like what you're seeing is like a projector of like an old film, and there's new characters that are placed on that.
It is
Mm.
very much an interpretation that your
Mm.
mind made. That's
So it's
why.
not what happened, it's what you believed about yourself is what
Yes.
happened, and that's what you carry with you,
Yeah, that's what
right?
you can ask your siblings. Remember that incident that happened with mom and dad,
And they'd
and
be
they remember it completely different
yeah,
than you do
yeah.
because it's a subjective interpretation.
So projective is going on. It's a self-defeating approach to fix that part of your ego. Okay, living out their conditioning. Okay, in case of boss that appears unreasonable, why do lots of people see them the same way in their own in our mind? We're seeing. Then we get that question a lot. Everyone hates that person. Everyone hates the boss. How can it be just my
Well,
mind?
Jung says that there has to be a hook for the projection to catch onto.
So everyone has the same hook.
Well, let's say the boss probably is at some and at in some ways, right? His persona is abrasive,
Yeah,
is difficult,
yeah.
right?
But what we're making it mean is what's going on. Yeah.
What we're making it mean is our own projection.
Yeah, so that's very important distinction because a lot of people say, "Well, that person is abrasive, or that person is bossy, or that person is mean and angry." How is that my mind? It's like, how are you internally defining yourself by their actions?
Yeah.
And so, for someone who has a mean boss, they're thinking they're tolerating it because they don't want to lose their job. So it's in you. You're seeing this angry boss but what your story is I'm stuck with this person.
Yes,
Or that you're not in touch with your own anger, and you don't know how to deal with your own anger, so it shows up as that person.
yeah, and there's another layer of phenomena here because our minds tend to synchronize with the group
Oh,
to
so we all see the
calibrate.
same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So if the group sees the boss as terrible, as soon as you enter the group and you're allowed in, right, you become part of the group, your mind will tend to see what they see.
It's like that's how cults are made too.
Yes.
Like if everyone loves someone, you tend to go, oh wow, that guru is going to be, he's going to save us, or a politician,
Hmm.
this kind of what do they call it? That groupthink that you get into, and the kind of occults that happen, and
Yeah.
glorification of people, and
Yeah, it's almost
either
like
glorification or tearing them down.
yeah. The projections and the hallucinations that we experience as individuals,
Hallucinations. It sounds so funny.
yeah, they happen at group level as well. People
Yeah.
can collectively hallucinate certain things, and it appears to them to be their reality.
Yeah. I mean, you see these cult documentaries, and everyone's like, I can't believe we all believe the same thing. And when we get out, we realize kind of like we
They
snapped out of
snapped
it.
out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why they don't want you to talk to anyone externally. And, that if you have to cut off your family and all that, because they want to control that group think. When I was first doing coaching, a lot of the teachings was about having these events and making sure they go to like 11 o'clock every night, keeping the air conditioning on like, really high, keeping people in the group and not letting them talk to anyone else, and just kind of keep them in that kind of, so they could sell their coaching. And I'm like, oh my God, that's such manipulation. It's not good for people. And but you end up going in there. And I've been in those groups too, where it's like, like you just kind of, and then you leave, and it's almost like you're under hypnosis in a way. I guess you are. That would be group hypnosis.
Yeah, luckily that's not the rule.
Yeah,
Those
there are
are
some
just
people. Yeah.
those are just a few people. Most people that are in coaching want to serve
Yes.
and
Yeah.
help people.
When someone who posts how happy they are on Facebook, it's always the case that the opposite is their shadow. When can we trust that someone's truly happy and not just a person they want to show to the world? Well, it's not always that, but I would say that someone who's always, always, always talking about how happy they are, it's kind of a red flag, because if you're really, truly happy, you don't need to post it every 5 minutes, and, I think a lot of people, they do it to kind of get other people, like the ex-girlfriends watching, when it's all this manipulation. So you just don't know what's happening. But yeah, I think people that are truly happy, we post happy stuff, but I don't do it every day. I love Rob. I love Rob. I love Rob.
Yes, you do.
I should. Maybe you want me to?
There you go.
Okay. But yeah, I think it's usually just watch, because you'll see someone who does that a lot, and then all of a sudden they'll have a breakdown, and then you'll see, oh, okay. But it's yeah, but also it's okay to be happy. It's not that we should all be miserable and post negative things. But I think that we have to not compare what people post as what the whole picture of who they are. We're seeing just a sliver of time. Again, also, this is when it comes to compassion. When you see someone or interact with someone that's a stranger, and they do something kind of jerky, like say they cut in line, or they, I don't know, just take the last roll of toilet paper at the store, and you're like, what a terrible person. You make such a global assumption on that person based on one little behavior. You see a snapshot of them. When you're dating, the person interacts with you and says one thing, and we make this global assumption of what that person is and what they stand for. And so we have to remember that we're doing that in a lot of ways. So no matter how good people are or what their persona shows, that it's all an interpretation from your mind. And that mind tends to exaggerate everything about that person based on one little sliver of behavior.
Yeah, there's another kind of a principle phenomena that all minds work the same way, is that you're only capable of seeing in other people what is in you.
Mhm.
And so if you're not able to be happy, you won't see happiness in other people.
Mm.
All right. Um, that's kind of a rule of thumb to follow. Whatever you're observing, if you see something beautiful in another person, that beauty is within you. I
Yeah.
mean, if it wasn't, you would not be able to see it.
That's a good, those of you, this is a good test. Go on the groups, go in, your feed. And when someone's really happy, do you feel that in your heart for them? Or do you feel mad at yourself for not having what they have? If you're genuinely happy, that means that it's not a shadow. It's not your projection, And so, and then when someone's unhappy, what does that stir up in you? Does it be like, oh my God, everyone's struggling, or that person's sucking energy? We tend to like look at other people and make judgments of what they post. And so it's just really a great way to have compassion and love and check in. I actually had this situation you described with the boss. So the entire office people had the persona of
Mm,
pleasing, and then the boss is carrying out all the projection of being critical.
right.
Yeah, it's like the pleasing people gave the boss permission on some level. They handed the script to be critical, or else they wouldn't have been in that situation. They wouldn't be in a situation because a pleaser almost always will attract critical, mean people
Mm,
because it's the opposite of their persona. So they're going to see that. So and then that boss will attract the opposite because it works. We fit together like puzzle pieces. And when we're not awake, that's what happens. With social media, a lot of people are compensating the lack and not good enough they feel within. It can be that they are truly happy. The question, how does their social media behaviors pull from you? Yes.
yeah,
That's what we just
that's a good way to see it. Whatever reflects back to you, don't judge yourself for having that reflection, but look at the reflection. What is it talking about?
Hi, Debbie and Rob. It's so good to see you both. I miss you guys. I giggled a couple times during your broadcast, and it really brought a smile to my face. I was wondering your thoughts about what is the role of the subconscious in what's happening in the world stage right now? So, unconsciously, I mean, everything is in duality. So we are always, the earth is a destructive. Mother Earth is both destructive and creative.
Excuse me.
You have to take a step away. So you're leaving me with this question? Okay. So the Mother Earth the mother archetype is the material world. And in the material world, there's both positive and negative, or the two sides, pleasant and unpleasant. And so I think what's happening is that there's these viruses that come. I mean, it's normal. It's a function of humanity. I mean, there's life and death. So it's kind of normal that we have an experience of destruction or what appears to be destruction. Now, the key is that we don't look at it as good or bad. And of course, it's very sad. The financial pressure, the physical toll, the death toll, all those things on the surface are terrible. But if you come from a material perspective and you see it in the duality, you're going to see suffering. But if you see it in the pure awareness of the divine, you see that it's a dream. It's dreamlike, and that the death of people is just transformation. It's their, how do you know that their physical life or where they are now is better or worse? Like, we don't know. We're making a judgment that being alive on this planet is better. So yes, there's the ego component to it. So I say that what you think is happening and how you perceive what is happening in the world right now. And as you can see, there's many, many different people with different perspectives. It's really reflecting their own mind. So how do you want to see it is really your choice. For me, I want to perceive it as a transformational time for us, a time of awakening, a time of people turning inward, getting less distracted and more conscious. But for someone else, what they'll see in their world is
Mm.
something different. What is your perspective?
Yeah. Just like individuals, a lot of what we do comes from our unconscious mind, our conditioning, just the genetics, the epigenetics, meaning the collective experience of our tribe, our cultures. So definitely at the world level, the global level, humanity also plays out a lot of stuff unconsciously, and what we do with it depends on our level of consciousness, how aware we are of what it is that we are experiencing. Just like at the individual level, we can use points of crises as opportunities for personal development. As anybody who's done personal development knows, those when you're in crises, that's your real opportunity right there to grow, right? To really make something of yourself beyond what you've been experiencing.
It's always the doorway to transformation. Jung says that there's no coming into consciousness without pain. And then if we know that, then whatever pain we're experiencing right now is leading to consciousness, higher consciousness.
So we're at that crucial point as a species on the planet that we can take this as an opportunity, a big opportunity to grow.
Okay. Well, my brother is spiritual and mindful, yet he's critical and judgmental, not just with me, but with others. So there's this idea. We have the 4 archetypes, the love personas that we teach in our coaching love group. And there's a type called the mystic, and it's a persona. And so people have a spiritual persona, but aren't truly awakened. They're not truly, like, they have spiritual practices and they do all the spiritual stuff. They can get caught up in dogma. They could be a part of a religion or new age or whatever. And what happens when it turns into a religious dharma, there's a duality of good and bad. And so the persona tends to not have patience for human, like lack of compassion, basically. Even though you're supposed to be the spiritual person, we tend to be harsh. If you have a mystic persona or a spiritual persona, you're harsh on others for making mistakes or stepping out of moral lines. And it really is a projection, because the persona is putting up this, I'm this wonderful spiritual person. And so the opposite goes in the shadow. And so that's why that works. So if you find him critical of you, that's your own self-criticism that you have to come to terms with. You're handing him the script. It's your voice. And actually, you can hear in his criticism, you'll learn to see your patterns, because if it's a brother, you probably heard it your whole life, and you could say, oh, that's not my voice. That's not me. And then you're able to, see it for what it is versus taking it to heart or trying to get his approval, which is probably what you've might have been doing, which why you take it as criticism. I respect him like a father figure. So him dissecting me. Yeah. So you're giving him all that power. And so you have to ask yourself, why am I giving someone who's critical that much power? And we typically, if it's a father figure, maybe there's this feeling that he's somehow linked to your survival, that if you lose him or that relationship with him, you will die. And that's kind of how we feel about our physical father. He provides us comfort and safety and a roof over our heads when we're kids, and then we're dependent on them. And then what happens is we find other fathers in the world, our lovers and our bosses, to be our father, just like we do with our mother. And like Rob, you said, the relationship template, that what's the word you use? The emotional template.
The emotional landscape.
Landscape is going to, just kind of repeat in all areas. So really, to see this not from your brother, but from your own mind, is look at how this shows up in other areas of your life. When you're attacking a boss or attacking a sibling or someone you date, I want you to recognize the pattern in other areas and in other people. And then you see, oh, this is my mind, instead of that in that person. I'm seeing an aspect of my mind. Okay. I have a lot of compassion for people. At the same time, I'm highly triggered by people who are irresponsible, get away with murder, and enabled by others. I guess this requires to doing shadow work, but still would like to hear your feedback. Yeah, it's not that you allow people to do bad things or you don't stand up for justice, right? Compassion isn't, oh, they're just human. They don't know. Their father was a murderer, so it's, of course they're going to murder people. It's not that at all. Or thinking that it's just an illusion and I don't need to defend and protect my life. Right?
Yeah, not at all. It's like a fierce clarity, of mind, that you know what the right action to take with the person is.
Instead of reacting out of fear, like you said, causes more defense and more you're kind of trapped with them.
Mm-hmm. It is what people or the ancients called spiritual power. If a person had spiritual power, that meant they knew stuff, right? They knew something about the nature of reality, and they could, in a sense, bend reality. But it wasn't the physical reality, right? Because it's the way you experience things, the way you interpret things. So these people that trigger us, they're doing us a huge favor because they're showing us the unconscious part of the mind. And they're playing it out in 3D and in color with emotions. It's like a beautiful simulation that includes everything you need to know about
it's like an X-ray of your own conditioning.
Yeah.
So so shadow work is always the best. Wayne Dyer had a story once where I heard him say that he was held up by someone with a gun in Chicago. And the guy was holding the gun. He's like, "Give me your wallet." And he goes, "Sure." He goes, Here's my wallet." He goes, "God, you must be in a tough spot to be able to do this to someone, like threaten their life. Like you must be having a lot of trouble." He said, "Let me send you money. I could send you money. I could, you take my wallet, take my credit cards. What do you need?" And he said, the guy just fell down to his knees and cried and said, "Yeah, like I lost my job and I'm just trying to make it." And he saw, like, he was able to have that clarity. Not most people would do, of that idea. I don't know if the story's true or not. You never know. But I mean, that's what compassion is. It's not reacting to their fear. It's saying, I could see why you're struggling, but you're not going to like be a victim to them, but you also aren't going to react with fear that could create more problems. The psyche is always transforming. Love the study of epigenetics. You want to talk about epigenetics? Because there's a lot of misinformation out there about it, that you can actually identify the gene that could change a pattern.
Yeah, that's a common problem. There's a lot of neuro nonsense as well. You'll see people put neuro in front of something, and they think it's scientific now because it says neuro this and neuro that. So you have to be careful. Same thing with epigenetics. It is a bona fide science, and it grew out of the science of genetics. But epi means above, and so it's a coding system that is above the genes, and it encodes cultural experiences, let's say group experiences of our immediate ancestors.
Yeah, it's so fascinating.
So that means what my great grandparents went through, like if they went through a revolution, a war, a famine, earthquakes,
and all of us went through a depression in World War I, World War II. Our ancestors
collectively. The epigenetic code, the code on top of the genes, codes for that, meaning it's passed on to us. You inherit the code, the epigenetic code. Now, it doesn't, at this point, the science is not to the point where people can know, oh, this code means that
you'll be more confident this time, right? Or have more bravery, or
nothing like that,
or more money. Like, I'm going to take the code. I've seen people say, I'm going to take your epigenetics and change them from poverty to wealth and stuff like that.
A lot of that.
So I'm sure that's not what you're talking about, but we want to clarify, because when
Yeah,
People.
that's pretty much nonsense. So you have to be careful of kind of the where the science is, and the science right now it's pretty promising. What it's showing is that you can you can um, you can analyze people's epigenetic codes and get a better sense of what it's going to do to their genetic code already.
Mm,
So, in terms of turning certain genes on and turn certain genes off, depending on what's going on in the environment, that the epigenetic science gives us a pretty good understanding
mm.
of how that's going to play out.
And there's also like we see cultures have the same epigenetic codes because they kind of a culture would go through a similar experience and they would be similar. But again, remember this is just the ego. It's not
Mm.
just the ego, but it's the ego's emotional template. It's not who we really are. So we don't want to get we want to be informed of these ideas and understanding our conditioned patterns and how they became. But remember that that's not who we are. Ultimately, we are just the pure awareness.
Yeah, that's a whole other level of the sciences because we know as well that there's uh, a mind body interaction.
Mhm.
So, how would the mind, let's say we meditate and we practice these self compassions and
Mm.
all these incredible spiritual practices, what impact does that have on the epigenetic code?
Yeah.
Right, that's a whole other
Mhm.
kind of branch that we need to investigate.
Yeah, and it's not like a quick fix where you know, can just erase your code do a meditation and change it. It's a longer
Yeah.
term kind of process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we early on we ran into people that were talking about changing the
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 DNA.
the DNA. And one of our colleagues said, "What are they taking blood from people or what?"
I don't know what that is. Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, be careful of that stuff. But yeah, it is a fascinating subject. So if you learn about it, it's really fascinating how we carry on.
mm,
Not only are not having a direct personal experience of something, but we carry in our genes, our ancestors' experience.
yeah, there's a branch of it's something like behavioral genetics
Mhm.
that kind of covers some of those
The psyche
fields.
is always transforming. When there's a destruction, there's new creation. Oh, she's just repeating. Okay. The people who don't know how to work with the mind are in fear or anxiety. I think I'm just reading my own quotes. uh, the people who don't know how to work with the mind are in fear or anxiety. The people who can use this work to cultivate a creative mind are able to stay in calm, see this as a transformational opportunity, and actually up level their income and relationships during this time. Yes.
Yeah, and here it's an important point is that we're not saying, oh, these are nice things to do. We're saying these are important things to really consider.
Mm.
What I've seen in clinical practice is that a lot of people get depressed or become anxious because they get demoralized
Mhm.
when they get stuck in these loops of I keep creating the same thing over and over. It's demoralizing. It's like
Mhm.
you're spending so much energy and it's your life essentially, and it's not really working for you because you keep projecting the same patterns over and over onto the environment, and it feels like you're trapped,
Mhm.
and that's very demoralizing.
Yeah.
That's when people have those mental health problems. So these are really important things to consider in working with your mind.
Any suggestions for connecting to helping my 22-year-old son? He's withdrawn into himself, takes everything as criticism. I know he's beating himself up. He graduated from college last May and still hasn't found a job. Yeah, that could be tough. I know he's creating more. I approach him with compassion and kindness. He reacts with anger as if I just criticized him. I would love to help him have hope and remember who he is. You're the psychologist, parenting, family dynamics expert.
Well, I don't consider myself an expert because it, when you're talking about family dynamics, I mean, now you're talking about a mystery.
Mm.
If we individually are kind of mysterious, now consider the interaction among individuals.
Mhm.
But having said that, we know there are ways to approach it, and really that's the best we can do is we find ways to approach this mysterious thing called our own mind, the psyche.
Well, I think is from just a practical standpoint, the more she tries to help him, he's perceiving that he's doing it wrong or he's not capable.
Mm.
And so maybe that's that anger. Like,
Yes.
I can't do it myself, or, I can't fix this myself.
Yeah, the general
Even though you have
principle.
a great intention and want to help.
Yeah, the general principle is like this: whatever's on the surface is a doorway into something deeper.
Yeah.
So if you try to fix the surface, you're kind of working at the wrong level.
Yeah. So just changing behavior is not.
That's right. So anger, we know in young people, it's usually not about anger. It's about depression,
Yeah.
right? There's something going on deeper, but the anger acts like a repellent to people. That you can't get near them, right? Because they're angry, and therefore it repels you. So if you, let's say, as a parent, you can have an impact, but you're going to have to be very patient and very conscious and not take it personally. That the anger is not really anger, right, towards you. It's coming from a deeper place. That gives you an entry point, right? If you're patient and not taking it personally, then you can remain in the situation a little bit longer than if you react, because then it just escalates and you get back to just, he gets back to defending and you're projecting and he's projecting. So you just want to take that approach, non-judgment, openness. Um, you want to give him as much the message that you're there to listen, that you're open to listen.
Yeah, and like trying to help him have hope. It's a really great thing to do is visualize him as his potential. Just hold that vision in your mind. Have talks with his higher self. There's this great exercise I have my clients do, and I have them like be their higher self and go into this beautiful garden and talk to the higher self of the person that you want to help but you can't reach. And you're basically having like a soul conversation, and you're just saying, I love you. Remember who you are. And just, I think for you, it'll help you feel like you're doing something, because I think what you're feeling now is this kind of helplessness. So it'll help you feel like you're doing something, and you will see a difference. You will see that there's something. You hold the vision of him, like you said, having hope and remember who he is. Just hold that. That is very powerful, especially if you're living together and he's living with you. He'll feel it on some level, and that's, I think, the best thing we can do for people instead of just verbally telling them is holding the vision. So I see people selling audio recordings claim you can get in a neuro gym to rewire your brainwaves.
Good
Yeah,
question.
it's just rewiring your ego. That's we kind of like it. I mean, it's making your brain think differently. But but are you, what if you don't understand what you're working with? You're building up your persona, basically.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to it.
Yeah.
But anytime you practice something new, your brain is essentially rewiring itself because it has to. If you want to learn a new instrument, for example, your brain is going to have to rewire itself in order to learn how to play that instrument. So when these people tell you, if you play this video game, it's going to rewire your brain, yeah, there's some truth in that. But anything you do will rewire your brain.
Yeah. You could if you're rewiring your brain just listening to us right now.
Yes, exactly.
So it's like they make it so
yes,
special.
now some people do research, let's say, what will affect the visual spatial element in the brain, and maybe design a game that will strengthen that ability. Okay, there might be something to that if that's what you're after.
And
Then
even
go for it.
visualization, very powerful to visualize what you want, have that image. You're wiring your brain to go there and think about it. Those are great things. It's just a technique, but it's not going to give you a transformation. It's just it gives you, it's a tool, but it's not like the promise of like, you have to ask yourself, I'm going to rewire my brain for money, which leads to more attachment to money. So is that really what you want to do? So it's about kind of looking at the whole picture and asking yourself, what is my goal here? Is my goal to just get a warm body to love me and to feel good about myself and feel confident and not be negative and have lots of money and a
That
big
sounds good.
mansion? But is that all I want, or do I want to be able to be free too? Do I want to create more attachment? Have you ever thought of creating a course on epigenetics? We have never thought of it, but
I
I mean,
think
kind of like what individuation is, right?
yeah, we've been thinking about a mind body course or
Mm.
certificate where we
Coach training.
so that would be something to include in there, the
Yeah.
epigenetic information.
Okay. Bruce Lipton in The Biology of Belief says that you can change your DNA by changing your thoughts. Can you explain a little more what exactly it is? Epigenetics is, I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, again, he's
I
not
love all
lying.
these questions.
He's not lying, because technically, anytime you experience something new, your DNA is changing essentially. Certain genes are turning on and certain genes are turning off. And so technically he's correct. Now, to what extent
Can we control it?
Yeah,
right?
can we be certain and pinpoint certain traits or certain genes? That, to me, the science is not there yet.
Well, you know what I love what you said is that Rob was, his PhD is in early childhood development. And he talked a lot about, disorders in children and physical.
Mhm.
And what you told me about there's a certain behavioral, like this gene that affects something behaviorally also affects something in the body. So remember you talked about like the lips, what was that behavior? Like if you turn that off, you treat that, you're going to actually affect the lips and I can't remember
Oh, I
exactly
think
what that
you're
was.
talking about there's a genetic disorder called Williams syndrome.
Yeah.
So Williams syndrome, what they found is that the gene that codes for elastin, which is the seal that seals the
Like our
lips
eyes.
and the fingernails,
Mhm.
that the gene that codes for that is the one that's messed up in that disorder, to put it
Mhm.
simply. And behaviorally, the way it plays out is that the individual with that syndrome has no social filters.
Oh,
So
kinda like me.
so as
So
children, they'll go off with anybody that
mm,
they see. They don't have
mm,
that caution of, oh, this
mm.
is a stranger. I shouldn't trust or be careful. They kind of just trust everybody. They're hyper social.
This is so fast. I have fascinating conversation with Rob all the time about this stuff, but and it's true. So if you think about that, just one situation, if you're messing around with your DNA thinking, well, this is going to make me have more money, or this is going to make me, change my karma around, my thoughts around love, you don't know what you're, messing with here, like
Hmm.
and I think the best way to do it is that you don't, again, make your ego be in charge of your personal development. You rely on the self, your higher self, to
Yeah.
bring you and create for you.
Yeah, but having said that, in the overall kind of approach to science, it's a useful tool,
Mhm.
obviously, but you want to see it as that. It's a tool, and it's not a way to gauge reality, let's
Mhm.
say, because science is very biased as well. It's kind of a very narrow way of observing the world and the
Mhm.
universe, and then trying to see if I can manipulate it or predict what it's going to do.
It's actually another religion, science, in a way, because they have certain things they believe in,
Yeah, they
if you
have
think about
a
it.
creation myth of the
Yeah.
Big Bang and all
Mhm.
that stuff. So it's very similar in those respects. But
So
you,
a lot of
you
people confuse, well, if it's science, then it must be real,
yes,
and scientists themselves will say it's just a theory. It's not, and that,
good
yeah,
scientists,
good
yeah.
scientists will say it's a theory. It's not absolute.
That's right. And with the understanding that as we gain more knowledge, we'll have to discard those theories,
Yeah.
right? That it's not an absolute. But you do need people like Lipton to kind of push the boundaries, because so
Yeah.
often science gets too bogged down in, well, this is what we know, and
Yeah.
that's it, no
And
more.
I've seen so much of the power of the mind over the body and physical stuff too. Very powerful. Thank you. I do that with connecting our hearts and higher selves. Once he willingly said he'd go for a walk with me right after. Good. Working with young people, what I've seen, it's important that they do not focus on their profession and search for a job within that professional domain. I don't know what that means. From my experience in work with young people and what I've seen, it is important they do not focus on only on their profession and search for jobby within that professional domain. I guess it's
Good advice. Yeah.
What tools do you suggest we use to avoid reacting too quickly to someone with anger when they trigger us? It's challenging to pause, respond, and very challenging. Well, if it's a pattern, then you should be more conscious of it. So already, if someone's angry, you'd be like, have a word, like, oh, this is, this happens all the time. What do I do? It's like slowing down that response time between that anger and what you do. And the fact that you know that you do that all the time or react too quickly is, I would work with with that feeling afterwards. And, we talk about this in our courses. We talk about sitting with the feeling and working with the emotion around anger. It's more, you're reacting to not the person, but you're acting to their emotion. And so that emotion of anger is somehow a threat to you that you don't know how to manage in your mind. So quick answer, but okay. Wow, we are way over time. What a long session.
We started late.
Yeah, we started a little late, but got a great questions. We got into the epigenetics and DNA. Not really what we planned on, but great questions. Thank you so much for all your participation and the comments and being with us today. And we'll be here every Saturday. If you haven't registered for our spiritual course, it's free this week. It ends this week. So it's the last class is on Monday. And then after that, we're going to start charging for it. So if you don't have it, make sure you register by Monday or you will have to pay. And it's really good, great 7-part program on just spiritual theory based on Vedanta. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the sun or wherever you're going, and see you soon. Take care.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.